Good afternoon, everyone. It is my honor to welcome you to the Excellence in Communication Scholarship Speaker Series. This is our 6th annual event, and we're so happy to welcome everyone here. Thank you so much for coming on a Friday afternoon. For those who may not know, my name is Stephen Spates. I'm a member of the Department of Communication, a faculty member here, and I'm excited to welcome all of you. This does not take place just on one person alone, so I do have a few folks that I would like to say thank you before we get started. First, I'd like to thank Mo Turner and the Department of Communication for their continued support and help in putting this together, as well as our wonderful staff members, Tommy, Kelsey, Nicole, individuals behind the scenes who work and do a lot of the seen and unseen work to put this together. We have an amazing group of graduate and doctoral students as well. I want to say thank you to UA, our president, and the other students who volunteered and reached out and said, how can we make this event successful? Thank you all for your help and continued support, as well as the Diversity Research Network, as well as the Excellence in Communication Scholarship Speaker Series Committee. So individuals, Brooke, Jim Deering, Manushka as well, for their continued support in making this a success. We're going to go ahead and get right started and begin our program. We have 2 speakers this afternoon, and we are going to have them introduced by our graduate students as well. And so I'll have our first graduate student begin with our introduction.
Hello, everyone. Welcome again to the 6th Annual Excellence in Communication Scholarship Speaker Series. On behalf of the department's Colloquium Committee, it is my honor to introduce our first speaker today, Dr. Jess Dominguez. So Dr. Dominguez is an assistant professor in the Department of Communication at the University of Kentucky, and she earned her PhD in Communication Studies at the University of Kansas in 2023. So Dr. Dominguez's research focuses on how communication is used to sustain close and established relationships and everyday use of interpersonal social media. While her work explores a variety of relationship types, she found friendship is the most interesting relationship to study on. And then she's awarded the 2023 Top Dissertation Award in the Division of Human Communication and Technology at NCA. And then her studies have appeared in prestigious outlets such as the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships, LGBTQ plus families, the Journal of Happiness Studies, etc. And her work has also been cited in popular outlets such as the Pink News and the Wall Street Journal. So these achievements are only a brief look into some of the amazing work Dr. Dominguez have done. And this afternoon, Dr. Dominguez will be presenting her work on the complexities of queer plus long-distance friendships. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Dominguez.
Is this thing on?
Yeah.
Always wanted to say that, and for it to actually mean something. So thank you all for also braving the elements outside and making your way here. As I was just introduced, my name is Dr. Jess Dominguez, and today the title of my talk is The People in Our Hearts and Pockets, an examination of the complexities of queer and long-distance friendships. So as you're sitting there, you might be wondering, friends. Why would somebody care so much about friends? And what's the deal with pockets? Okay. Which, don't worry, the pockets question will be answered eventually, okay? But I want to give a quick background to help you kind of get into my brain onto why I think friendships are so important. So currently, I live in Lexington, Kentucky. I work at the University of Kentucky, but I am originally born and raised in Los Angeles, all the way on the other side of the country. And I was lucky enough to grow up next to my best friend. We were next door neighbors, met when we were 3. She was my maid of honor at my wedding. This is her visiting me in Lexington, Kentucky. She is probably the longest relationship I've ever had in my life. And she has always been kind of an inspiration to me in my research to say, like, what is so special about a person who you have no legal ties, no biological ties, no reason to have them in your life other than you simply want them there. But of course, I left LA to go to grad school. I went to Kansas, Rock Chalk to any fellow Jayhawkers out there. And when I was there, I met people who understood a part of me that no other people really had. And that part was that I'm a nerd. I loved going to classes in undergrad. I loved communication theory. I loved my advanced interpersonal class. At that time, I attempted to read the journal articles that I was assigned, and I thought it was fascinating. And the people sitting next to me in undergrad did not share that passion. But when I got to grad school, I met people who were like me, who loved to read the readings and talk about the readings and think about the readings and ask questions. But then, like many of us might understand, after grad school, we all scatter to the winds. And now I get to see them at conferences, or I might get to see them when I am traveling to their hometown. But mostly conferences, the annual visits. But now that I'm in Kentucky, I'm not necessarily without friends. I've been able to develop a community there of people who also see the important parts of my identity. That being somebody who loves to read and ask questions and think about big things. But also, as a queer person, being able to find somebody who understands that part of my identity as well. And so I am fortunate enough that I have a community of people across the country who I can lean on, who I can call on, and these people are my friends. And I am someone who believes in the power of friendship, in what community can bring us. And so today, I want to talk to you about two studies that touch on two pretty big overarching ideas about friendship, and that's similarity and talk. So to first talk about similarity, I got a quick little agenda for us. So there's two studies that I want to talk about, but before I get into those studies, I also want to talk about just a baseline of friendship. So who are our friends? Why do we choose to be friends with the people that we have or that we might want to have? One thing that we know for sure is that we tend to like people who are like us. Similarity is a pretty big part of friendship formation. We look at people and see what's on the surface initially. Okay? Are they wearing a Dodgers hat? Did they say Rock Chalk back to me? Do they have a similar dialect in the way that they speak where I can tell like, oh, I think they're from the Midwest. Oh, I think they're from the West Coast. We look for these little signals to say, is someone in the room like me? And that common ground is a really good springboard for developing a friendship with them. Over time, other similarities become more important. Like, do we share the same core values? Do you like to volunteer on the weekend much as I do? Do you believe in fairness? Do you believe in justice? Are you a fan of organized sports? Is that something that's important to you? But ultimately, similarity is what draws us to people. And one reason why is because when we see that people are like us, it affirms our own experiences. It validates the way that we see and experience the world. And it's nice to know that in a way, the way that we do things is right because other people are doing it as well, or they believe in the same things that we do. Now, studies show that friendship as a whole and across the lifespan offer a lot of benefits that are both tangible and intangible. So these are things like they bring us happiness, they bring us joy, acceptance, a sense of belonging, but they also offer material aid, instrumental support, okay? Think about who do we ask for rides to the airport? Who helps us move out of our apartments? Who helps us laugh when we're feeling sad? We look to our friends, whoever they might be, but we like it when they're like us. So one day, I was talking with my friend, Brooke, and we were talking about this podcast episode that she listened to, where there was this woman who went on a cruise with her mom, and it was billed as a gay cruise. However, it was actually a gay men's cruise, and the person going was a lesbian. And her mom was of the mind to say, like, well, they're also gay. They're like you. Isn't that kind of enough? Shouldn't you be happy, essentially? And so we were kind of like talking back and forth, and we're like, blanket statements everywhere, really. Because on one hand, sure, it feels nice to be in a similar space like that. And oftentimes in the queer community, as queer people, you're told you need to find your people, the people like you. but what does that mean, people like you? And so Brooke and I, we were texting back and forth about how if you go out and build this community like you, people say that all the time, but what actually happens when you do that? What happens when you do have people like you? And also, what happens when they're not exactly like you? What if they're similar to you, but they haven't lived every single life experience that you have? So we got together and we, did the typical academic thing. Let's do a study. And we happen to have access to this very large data set, which I will get into a moment. And we decided to look at what is the well-being benefit? What is the rewards that queer people feel when they are able to have friends in their networks who reflect their own experiences back to them, who are similar to them? And as we're talking, we also noticed that, well, in the queer community, friends aren't always just friends. Your friends can sometimes pull double duty in that they fulfill a friendship role, but they also fulfill familial roles as well. Research shows that one of the possible consequences to coming out as a teenager or a young adult is that it may not be well received by your parents. And so some negative reactions include the parents pressuring or attempting to force conversion therapy. But it also is even more smaller things like becoming very strained in communication, that the frequency of contact and communication declines very quickly. And studies have shown that this estrangement is stronger between children and fathers than it is between children and mothers, but it still exists. So what happens when we have a 19-year-old queer person who is now talking much less to their parents, and they're about to go and be independent, go to college, live on their own? And think back to all the things that you had to learn when you first became an adult. Things that maybe you relied on your parents or older brothers and sisters or older cousins teaching you. When I first went to college, I didn't know how to grocery shop. I didn't know how to properly sustain myself and saying like, what is a meal that I can eat? And also what kind of household items, what is that? What do I need? I didn't know how to do laundry properly, how to separate the clothes, what it meant to use hot, warm, cold, tap cold. I still don't really know the difference between all of them, but I know enough. How to do even like car repair, household repair, all these things that maybe now when we think about it, we're like, I would call my mom, I would call my dad. But what happens when you don't have the opportunity to call mom or dad, or you don't have a big brother or a big sister? In the queer community, friendships also fulfill these important gaps. They are the ones who we can lean on reliably, consistently, to not only be our friends, but to be our pseudo-parents, to be our mentors, to be our guides into being an independent adult living. So then we were really thinking, we're like, okay, all right, friendship must be pretty important in the queer community, which means that we should probably see some pretty big benefits to well-being, in that these people should be pretty connected, pretty satisfied, probably, hopefully, less lonely. So Brooke and I continued. And we decided to really put some focus onto understanding, we say these things in the queer community, where is the proof in the pudding, okay? And so we wanted to focus on how does having even just one queer friend as a queer person, how might that benefit your well-being, okay? And I've talked a lot about friendship. I love it. I think it's fascinating. One thing that's also pretty fascinating to me about friendship research is how far behind it is compared to other relationship research. Interpersonal research does a really great job at romantic relationships, like dating relationships, courtship, marriages, divorces. Family studies does a really good job at parent-child relationships, at grandparent-grandchildren, sibling relationships, but across interpersonal friendship, comparatively, is still a little behind in terms of what do we know and what do we not know about friendship, because what we don't know is pretty big right now. And there is more and more research every day, and so Brooke and I, we wanted to throw our hat in the ring and say, we are gonna be a part of the people who are understanding more about friendship. And on top of that, queer people need more spotlight attention in research. There are so many unique perspectives out there to understanding communication, to understanding relationships, and we also wanted to be a part of that, to give this unique perspective an opportunity to understand not only what is friendship like in a communal space, but what is it like when it holds a very unique place in that person's heart. So our driving question was, Does having a queer friend impact your well-being? And then Brooke and I went back to our original discussion of, does it matter if that friend is the same sexual identity as you, or if they're just another queer person? If, as a lesbian, your other queer friend is also a lesbian, does that offer more or less benefits? Is it any different than if you were a lesbian and you had a gay man friend, or a bisexual friend, or a pansexual friend, but they're also a queer person, so they do have that commonality? There is research on trans folks that says when trans people have friends who are also marginalized, whether they are another queer person or a person of color, they understand it to an extent. They understand the general experience of living on the margins of society. But they don't always get it, that, in quotations, it, that is very unique to being a trans individual. Versus when they have friends who are also trans, they do understand this very unique experience of being this identity. So we were trying to understand it from two ways. What does it mean to have similarity or homophily in your network when it is mirrored right back to you in the same way, or when it's reflected in a similar way? Quick water break. Now, I'm not sure if anybody here has heard of the American Friendship Project, but you will be hearing quite a bit about it today. My other lovely friend, Natalie, is going to offer some more in-depth details about the American Friendship Project, but I just want to say that Brooke and I used data from the American Friendship Project, from 2 years of it, and we looked at people who identified themselves as queer. And when I say queer, as I've said a few times today, I'm talking about people who identify their sexual identity as lesbian, gay, bisexual, asexual, pansexual, or questioning or unsure. So we retained people who identified themselves in that way. And then we looked at all the friends that they reported on. And we went to go see how many of those friends also had a queer sexual identity. And we looked at how many of them had the same as the participant, and how many of them had a similar. And so to answer our questions, we did t-test analysis, comparing the people who had friends who were of a same or similar sexual identity on 4 well-being outcomes, that being life satisfaction, loneliness, connection, and disconnection. And so again, I just want to give you a quick view of the scales we use. I know that Natalie's going to offer some more details on it. I think a little got clumped up there. But here is our mean, standard deviations. Except for loneliness, the other 3 were all using a 7-point Likert scale. Loneliness used a 3-point frequency scale. And the phrasing for all these questions was how they felt about these different variables from the past year. And so what did we find? First, we found that it does feel good to have queer friends. That, yes, the people who identify as queer, who report having at least one queer friend, did report greater life satisfaction, which we thought, awesome, that is a smile on our face. But, unfortunately, the people who have queer friends compared to the people who don't also report more loneliness. And so that was our first, not hurdle, but that was our first stop to say like, oh, okay, well that's kind of interesting considering that we're constantly told like these are the people that are going to help you, that are going to make your life better. And so we see 2 things happening at the same time. And a similar pattern occurred with connection and disconnection, that the people who have queer friends feel more connection, they have a community, they have belonging, but they also feel more disconnected. They also feel like outsiders. And so what we come to the conclusion is that having similarity in your network is a good thing. It affirms your identity, it affirms your experiences, validates all the experiences that you have had, and you have people who understand you. At the same time, having those people reflected back to you makes you aware of what your situation is. Here in the US, a lot of people who identify with a marginalized identity still suffer from a lot of stigmatization, whether that be in families, at the workplace, at school. And so that's why they often seek each other. And so on one hand, it's like, yay, we found each other. But then it's also, why are we out here? And so it's this tension of having a queer identity here, specifically in the US. But this experience of feeling like we have each other, why do we have each other, might also be reflected in other marginalized experiences, whether that's being a person of color in a predominantly white area, or being a person of lower socioeconomic means, being surrounded by people of higher socioeconomic needs. When you feel like you have found someone who understands your experience, fantastic, and we support that. You should find people who are like you, who can affirm yourself. But you should also be aware of the fact that it might also bring up feelings of more heightened awareness of your marginalized identity. Something that Brooke and I also noticed in our data was that a lot of these people, while they have queer friends, they don't necessarily live close to their friends. So we wondered, what if that might be contributing to this feeling of loneliness or disconnection, where you feel like you have people available to you, but not really available to you? Because how often do you get to see them and talk to them, hug them even? Which then made me think of my friend Natalie, because Natalie and I, we both study mediated communication. And we know that in that world, face-to-face, in-person communication is the gold standard. There is some very unique benefits to talking to people in person, especially people who you care a lot about, as opposed to when you talk to them through mediated communication, like texting or phone calls or email or video calls. So I mentioned I live in Lexington, Kentucky right now, over here. Natalie lives in Fort Collins, Colorado. So how often do I get to see Natalie? Again, once, maybe twice a year. But all my friends are scattered between LA, Seattle, Michigan, Indiana, North Carolina, Kansas, Missouri. Only some of my friends. Natalie's friends are in similar places: Vegas, Missouri, New York, Iowa. And so we have friends all over the place. And I know I'm not alone in that. I know a lot of us might have friends or families at great distances from us. But the very cool thing about being human is that we are resourceful, and that if we want to have people in our life, if we want to talk to them, we will find a way to make it happen. Because we have developed communication technology that can bring people together across time and distance. And so Natalie and I were talking about this finding in particular. And I brought up, I was like, I have so many friends all over the place. I know that I use more technology with them because I want that relationship to still be around. So I mentioned that similarity and talk were the two big things that I wanted to talk about today. So similarity, talked a lot about that. Talk, this was something that I can reflect back on from undergrad. When I was in advanced interpersonal, we read this, even at that point, kind of an older book chapter from Steve Duck. And one of the biggest things that I took away from that reading was there was this little line that he says, talk is the relationship. If you are not talking to them, if you're not in communication with them, is there a relationship? Okay? And that's something that supports relationship maintenance research. When we think about that you're no longer friends with somebody, we might say things like, well, we don't talk anymore. Or they don't text me. I don't text them. We stopped talking. We talked less and less and less, and we stopped reaching out. And so this idea of, are you still talking to them? Are you maintaining that connection? Is how we understand whether or not a relationship also exists. So as Natalie and I are talking, we remembered communicate, bond, belong theory that proposes two pretty big ideas. Number one, all humans have an inherent need to belong. We all have a desire to be included, to have community, for belonging, for relationships. In addition to this, we have a limited mental resource called social energy, and it varies across people. Some people have a lot of social energy, some people have a little, some people have average. But you have to use social energy anytime you interact or communicate with people. So we have these two things we have to keep in mind. We want relationships, we want community. We have to be mindful of how much energy we have. So when we want to talk to people and maintain our relationships, we're thinking about it from an investment point of view. Calling this person, going to coffee with this person, hanging out with this people, sure, it's going to cost me whatever the unit of money is, energy. It's going to cost me some energy, but I like these people. And they bring me connection. They give me a sense of belonging. They are my people. So it's worth it to use energy on these people. It's an investment. Or if you're first meeting someone and you get the feeling that we could be good friends, you're also going to think about it as an investment. You're like, yes, I will go to coffee with this person. I'll go to lunch. I'll go watch the movie with them. Because I have a feeling that this person in the future is going to be an important source of belonging. So back to our original dilemma, what happens when you enter offline access in a limited sense? So offline access meaning, can you access this person in person, offline? Can you have face-to-face communication with them? And when we become geographically separated, we get limited offline access. We might only be able to see those people every once in a while, at a conference, at a wedding, at a speaker series. And so then when that happens, then the amount of mediated communication that you use to maintain those relationships should go up. And this is something that happens or has been happening for a while. In the early 2000s, when college students would move away, they would use email to stay in contact with friends and family back home, or they would use instant messaging. When Facebook got more and more popular and people were finding each other who were spread out, we used that as well. Families have for 100 years used phone calls to stay in contact with each other or with children or with grandparents. And we got really creative with video calls, I want to say 6 years ago to the dot. Happy paniversary. When COVID hit and we all had to go locked down and we really couldn't see people in person, we started using more texting, more emails, more video calls, more ways of communicating through digital means because we knew we still wanted people in our lives. We still wanted to know what our friends were up to, what they were doing, how they were doing. And so all of those things increased. And so we know that when we start to use mediated communication more to stay in contact with especially close ties, that can benefit our well-being. When we call people more, video call people more, sometimes, text people more, it can bring us connection, life satisfaction, it can reduce our loneliness, but there are some complicated parts that I'll get to in a second. We do know that, or Natalie and I agreed that there's a pretty good chance that with long-distance friends, you would probably use interpersonal media more than you would with your geographically close friends. And interpersonal being, in this study specifically, texting, voice calls, video calls, and email. We thought that would most likely go up with people that you live at a distance from because you don't have the face-to-face option, or not nearly as frequently as you do with people who you live geographically close to. When it comes to does that frequency, how does it impact your well-being? While there are some studies that show support in the increase of phone calls and video calls, there's other studies that say that increase in video calls, for example, actually increases loneliness. And then there's a lot of complicated results around texting, where sometimes when you increase it, it leads to more social connection or it can reduce the effects of isolation. But at the same time, if you decrease it, that might also negatively impact you. And so sometimes it really depends on who you're talking to, about what, for how long, and all these different factors, in particular with texting. So we thought, is there a clear-cut relationship between the frequency of these modalities and the way it impacts our feelings of connection and loneliness when these modalities are used with geographically close or long-distance friendships? So we turn to the AFP data again, because this project is so cool in that it is one of the first of its kind to try to understand what is the experience of friendship for the average American. It's a representative sample across the country. And so we thought, all right, let's look. How are people talking to their close friends and their distant friends? Now for our first hypothesis, we used a t-test to compare the frequencies between geographically close and long-distance friends, and we used regressions to look at that relationship between the frequency of these modalities and the effects on connection and loneliness. In those regressions, we did control for age, gender, race, face-to-face communication frequency, and emotional closeness in those friendships. How did we define geographically close and long distance? Based on mileage, in a sense. So your geographically close friends were coded as if they lived in the same neighborhood or same city or same town. Your long distance friends lived in a different city, different state, or different country. Let me see if it got clumped up a little bit. And as far as like your frequency, we asked them, how often do you use email, texting, voice, and video calls with that specific friend on a scale of 1 to 9, with 1 being never, 5 every other week, and 9 several times a day. And we were very curious about what was happening because at least for me, it reflected a lot of my own life back to me because I am someone who tries hard, but I'm mindful of my real day-to-day life. So I call my mom every other day, try to call my dad once a week. I call my best friend maybe once a month. We text a lot more frequently. I'm not somebody who's big on video calls. I'm not sure why. I understand the appreciation for them, but I've never quite got into it. I think I get too distracted by whatever my eyebrows or my face is doing, which is why I'm glad this is not a Zoom presentation. But I was like really interested. I was like, what's happening out there? Oh, we use the same measures from Connection or from the queer study, just to give a quick highlight on that. Well, we were stumped on the first one. It turns out that people use these mediated modalities more with the people they live close to than the people they live far away from. We circled that for a little while in a meeting, actually, because we were like, if that's not true for me, how is it true for other people? We were curious. And then I realized, I was like, well, let me think about my own life again. How often do I text my friends, Rebecca and Chandler, who we all work together, live in the same place? I text them pretty frequently. And sometimes it's little random updates. It's about planning our next hangout. It's maybe like reiterating a joke that we made earlier, or sending a random TikTok or a meme. And then I think about how often I text my best friend. A lot less frequently, but what we talk about feels a lot more impactful. So the findings to our research questions kind of emphasize that when it comes to using mediated communication with your friends who live close and far, maybe it's more about quality than it is about quantity. And I say that because when people used voice calls and email with their geographically close, and email specifically with their long distance friends, those are really strong predictors of connection. And these were not used as frequently as some of the other modalities. Our most frequent modality was texting, actually. Email was our least used. But somehow, when you use it with your long distance friends, that is a pretty strong indicator of how connected you feel. And when you have voice calls with friends who live near and far, that's also a good predictor of how good you feel in terms of connection. Now, in terms of what is going to help you fight loneliness, not too different, actually. Voice calls with geographically close and long-distance friends, really good predictors of a negative effect on loneliness. Emails, again, with long-distance friends can help reduce loneliness. And so we think about these two modalities, some of the oldest mediated modalities we have, but they're also very familiar. It's easy to understand how to write an email. It's a letter. We all know, I hope we all know how to write a letter, but we all know how to reach out to people. And while we didn't ask people what they wrote in their emails, we have some explanations that we can offer. Letter writing can sometimes include more meaningful communication. And also, on a more practical note, how many times do we get an email from a friend? An email that's not about work, not about school, not a promotion. How many times do you get an email from a friend just saying, hey, how are you? I was thinking about you. Or I saw this thing. Even if it's just a few words, just to see that something is standing out amongst the Jimmy John's emails probably feels really good that somebody thought about you, wrote you an email, a letter. And with phone calls, I definitely resonate with that. We may live miles apart from the people we care about, or we might live really close to them, but we might not be with them. But with a phone call, you can take them to the grocery store with you. They can join you on your commute home from work, or when you're folding laundry on the couch, they can be right there. And when we have these phone calls, suddenly those friends are not miles away or even down the street. They're right there in the car next to you. They're sitting on the couch with you. They're strolling the grocery store with you. And that is probably what is helping us feel connected to them and less lonely. Now, voice calls and emails are pretty straightforward. Unfortunately, texting and video calls, not so much straightforward. So we found that with video calls, they were predictive of connection with geographically close friends, but only in 1 year. And they were predictive of loneliness in long-distance friends, but only in the other year. And then on the opposite years, no relationship. And so with the video calls, that was a little surprising because, especially with the long-distance friends, that's kind of the only time you get to see these people, but that might also add a bit of pressure on the conversation. If you don't make the most out of that video call and you don't know when you're going to see them the next time, that much pressure might kind of ruin the fun of the video call. Versus when you're video calling somebody who lives down the street from you, it might not be a really important scheduled call. You might just be talking to them on FaceTime because I want to show you something. We start off a phone call, you want to switch over to it. And in that moment, it might just seem fun and spontaneous. Texting, also kind of complicated in the terms of it's really messy, in that 1 year we saw an association, a negative association to connection, but only with geographically close friends. And then with long distance friends, we only saw a connection or an association to loneliness, but again, also in 1 year. But despite it being kind of messy, they are consistent in that it's negative. The associations that we saw were a negative effect to connection and a positive relationship to loneliness, despite it being here and there and everywhere. Which makes sense to some of the more past and recent studies on texting that show that compared to other media modalities, texting offers less emotional benefits and is a bit lackluster in what it can do to our well-being, in that if it does anything, it might be negative or it might do nothing. So it then prompts us to say that if you're looking for ways to connect with your friends, to talk to your friends, maybe don't do texting. Maybe do video calling. But definitely do voice calls and letters. So we carry our mobile devices everywhere we go. You leave the house, phone, wallet, keys. And your phone is in your pocket. And so with our mobile devices, we have access to interact with our friends. We have the opportunities to talk with our friends, the people who we care most about, not only in our hearts, but they're right there in our pockets. So if I can leave you with anything today, it's that you should talk to your friends. Find the people who are similar to you in the ways that matter. Call them, maybe leave them a voicemail. Write them an email. You never know, it might really make their day. Thank you.
Thank you again for this wonderful talk. Here it comes to our Q&A time. So if anyone has any questions, please raise your hand. I will do my best to pass over the microphone one by one. Okay? Any questions?
I have a question. Maybe I can just speak loud enough. I'm curious if within the friendship study that's done, if they have anything in there on like reciprocity in terms of if I feel like I'm reaching out to people and I'm not getting that same back, does that make me feel kind of lonely?
That's a good question. Whoa. I don't think there is a measure of reciprocity in the AFP data set, but something to consider as far as explaining the loneliness or disconnected feelings, because yeah, that probably feels a little insulting and frustrating that if you keep texting them or trying to call them or trying to set up a video call and it can feel like they're blowing you off, or it feels like they do reach out, but it feels very obvious that you're putting more work in. And so that might feel bad and it might make you feel like, I don't know if this person really wants to be my friends. That's a good thing to consider.
Thank you for the presentation. It was amazing. So in the second study, you said you control for age, gender and like all the demographic information. Were there any differences across those, factors in the study?
I don't think so. Not to the point.
I believe age did pop up as one, which we've seen that pretty consistently.
Right, because
in
I would
different
imagine that
reviews. Yeah.
depending on how old you are, we communicate a little bit differently than people who are older. So I was just wondering if there was any interesting findings you might have had, or I would love to hear more about it later today.
Yeah. As far as the demographics, I know we were really focused on controlling for like face-to-face frequency and emotional closeness, just to be able to say like above and beyond like how often they see each other, how close they feel to these friends, what is uniquely coming from these modalities. I believe the average age on both samples was about 45. 45. And I think it was age in
Yeah.
both
This
years?
also is like a chunk of my talk.
Okay,
Yes.
yeah, let's hear that too. Thank you.
About the bigger data
All
set.
right.
Yeah, I didn't want to repeat
I don't
too
wanna
much.
see-
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was some splitting of parts.
Yeah.
In your first study, you focused on the impact of the queer friend on their well-beings. Have you ever looked at those non-queer friends, whether they will also exert similar impact on their well-being?
In this study in particular, we wanted to focus on the queer friends as the participants were also queer. I think a lot of the other studies that have come out of the AFP data do look at all friends. And off the top of my head, I can't tell you the exact numbers of what the difference is between having queer and straight friends. But I think, in generally, what we've learned over the last few years is that having friends, more or less, is not so much a difference as it's more that you have friends ends up being pretty important.
So I have another question. So does the number of friends that you have matter in this case? So if you have maybe just one queer friend, or if you have, say, maybe 5 or 6, does it matter in terms of feeling marginalized? Does that go down as you have more friends that you can say, okay, now I feel like I'm more of a community than just isolated out?
Good question. A lot of the people in that data set actually only had one queer friend. Most of them, they were all reporting having 5, 6, 7 friends, but for, I want to say about 80% of them, they only had one other queer friend, and everybody else in their friendship network was straight. Which I didn't think that would be too much of an impact. And I did a couple of exploratory results, and having more friends didn't make a difference, and that might be because a lot of people didn't have more than one queer friend. In qualitative studies, there is some support to say that if you have an all queer, close-knit community, those people especially feel a sense of belonging and a sense of validated identity. But I don't think those particular studies focused on comparing people who have more queer friends versus less queer friends. Those were focused solely on communities of queer friendship together.
Does it indicate like how close the relationship is? Like, if I have one really, really good friend versus 5 kind of nice friends, like, am I going to be happier? Is there something in there that would say like just having one really good friend is better than 5 kind of moderately close friends?
That's a good question. We didn't, look at that. It's possible. I mean, that could be said about any friend, whether or not they're queer. If you have one good person to rely on for support, that might make more of a difference than having 10 so-so nice friends. But we didn't compare that in terms of like how close are you to this friend. We were really focused on like, is that person there or not? Yeah.
Hello. Hey. Does it work? Thank you for the presentation. Really great. I loved it. And I know the American Friendship Project, the data set is very big, but each question is not that detailed. Not every question is very detailed, so it's kind of difficult to make it super very, very specific analysis. But I'm very amazed by how you make a story with a finding. I was wondering how you're thinking this finding, the takeaway of this finding for non-queer people. Of course, not every research has to be about non-queer people, but so we talked about this a little bit yesterday. That it seems that relationships for queer people are more. There's more liberty in there, in that they call people who are not blood related to them in blood, their family. And I remember I also, I think I saw Brooke forwarded this on LinkedIn too. It's a Pew Research Center finding that Black individuals are more likely to name people who are not related to them as their family as well. So I wonder whether there's a more general mechanism in which the marginal group in a society, they take advantage or mobilize those non-institutionalized relationships for their personal well-being. And I want to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I think it's a possibility that this idea of extending or redefining family could be more common in people who are minorities or marginalized, as opposed to people who are heteronormative or white. Why that's happening, I think there's a lot of different explanations. In fact, probably like structural. Like, where do you find yourself if you are a marginalized person? Do you find yourself in a place where you don't frequently get to see a lot of people like you? And when you do get to see somebody who represents or shares a part of you, you are drawn together. And it can feel like, similar to queer folks, there is support there that may not be close by. I don't think I've ever called somebody family if I hadn't known them for a long, long time. But I do have a really close relationship with my family. I think I mentioned how often I call my parents, which I didn't think was weird until I tell people and they're like, oh my God, you're such a good daughter. And I was like, if I don't call my mom, she will call me. And I feel grateful that I'm able to have that connection with them, because I know a lot of people do turn toward their friends, whether they're queer, whether they're people of color, whether they're trans, because maybe it feels more comforting to have friends who you can call family, and there's less pressure, there's less expectations, there's less clear-cut rules on what that relationship has to look like if you do want to call it a family. If you do want to call your friend your cousin or your uncle, but outside of the traditional normative structures of family, there's liberty there, there's freedom there to define, and what does our family look like? What is it? It doesn't have to look like the way that we think about family does. We can build our own family structure. And I think that freedom is very attractive to a lot of people who are otherwise trying to figure out how to fit themselves into normative structures. That when they have the opportunity to redefine something, I think they want to take advantage of it.
So hearing you talking about this, I thought of this kind of old idea called embeddedness. So the marginal groups, they are by nature more disembedded in the social structure. So it seems like maybe it's a curse, maybe it's a benefit, but this characteristic motivates them perhaps to re-embed themselves in their chosen relationships.
Yeah, very cool.
one, really good, really great presentation. Is this on? It doesn't feel like it's on. Oh my goodness. Really great presentation. Really loved to see the great benefits of friendship as a queer person, for sure. One question that I had that I was thinking about, both when you mentioned the gay cruise scenario and the importance of connecting with other queer people, is that sometimes in queer network communities, there's this acceleration of intimacy in which sometimes there are queer people that hook up with other queer people and navigate between a platonic relationship and then one that is more committed, whether that's monogamous or consensual non-monogamy. And so I'm curious to know, I don't know if you've seen this in any of the literature that you've looked at, or perhaps contemplated this in the context of the findings that you all have. If there's a sense of, would that difference in relational closeness, or I don't know, capacity for different parts of that relationship to show up, if that would make a difference in a person's well-being, in the connectedness that they have to their friends with benefits, so to speak.
So just to make sure I'm understanding, you're asking if the fact that you can be friends with somebody who you currently are or have in the past been physically intimate with, yes, if that impacts your feelings of connection.
Yes. To well-being. It's mentioned a little bit about that people are friends with their exes, or that they are physically intimate with their friends in the queer community. That is discussed in a few of the studies that we came across. And the way those scholars frame it is in a positive way, because in heteronormative societies, when you break up with somebody, there tends to be bad blood, for lack of better words, in that person is a part of your past, that they are no longer a source of support. They are most likely a negative association or connotation. And in the study, a lot of people cite that is kind of a benefit to queer people, that they can see past whatever negative experiences they've had and still see that this person was good to me, that they did bring me connection. And so I'm going to choose to focus on the fact that there's someone who I love to watch reality TV with. They're the kind of person who is going to make the right commentary during a movie. They're the person, like, if I want to go get tapas, like, they were the best person to go with. Like, so we broke up, so we don't get along in that way anymore. There's still this person who brought me so much joy. Why am I going to cut that off, considering what other options I have? If this is someone who has brought me connection, I think something that queer people sometimes, and maybe they do it because they feel like they have to, but at the end of the day, they still have that communal tie there, and they still have that source of support. So, and I think when you ask queer people about like being friends with your ex, I think any queer person might give a different perspective. I think some people like that aspect of the queer community, and I think some queer folks are annoyed by that aspect because it creates other complicated situations. But if we want to look at it from a more, like, as I'm a positive person. So looking at it from a positive perspective, like, at least you still have a friend. You still have someone who understands you, who you can joke around with, who can take you to the airport, depending on how long ago the breakup was. And I think keeping those connections alive might be a benefit to your well-being as opposed to a negative. And that is under the conditions that it was a healthy relationship, as opposed to a toxic relationship, which are also common in the queer community. And I think those have a much different conversation.
We have two more questions left. So any other questions?
Thank you for wonderful presentation, Jess. I have a quick question. Was there any systematic differences between long distance versus geographically close friendship in terms of relational features? For example, was there?
Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
No, Jess is great at answering this, I promise. We talked a lot about it.
Yeah. For example, all of my long distance friends are once upon a time, long time ago. Yeah, they were geographically close to me. Yeah, and then it depends on the participants context. Yeah, as I moved to Michigan 6 years ago, all of my geographically close friends, currently close friends are I had just 6 years of history with them. So I was just wondering whether there was any systematic difference.
I do remember that the long distance friends were longer in length, that they had known each other longer, which makes sense. Like, as you just said, like you grow up with people and then you hit a different part of your life and you move away or they move away. And when you get to somewhere new, like you have these friends, but you've known them for less time. So we did notice that the long distance friends had a longer relationship. I'm trying to think of the right words, but they had known each other longer. Yeah, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head.
It's okay. So we purposefully limited the sample down and the type of friend so that we had actually really pretty comparative. So if it's like all things being equal, besides the fact that the long distance friend has been friends with you longer, that they're both people we might consider close friends. So in the AFP stable, you could call people lots of different labels. So trimmed it so that it was a direct comparison of one long distance and one geographically close friend. So you had to have both to be included. And it had to be someone that you were calling at a higher level. And then still even within that, controlling in the analysis for the level of closeness.
We have one more question. So any other questions?
Thanks for the talk, very interesting. Mine is the oddball question. Do you have any opinion, and it's okay to say no, about digital companions, AI pals, or embodied conversational agents, what they will do for the friendship equation overall?
Great question. Something that I am currently thinking about and testing. I think it depends on how far we're thinking into the future. I think in like the immediate future, we could see a lot of benefits in terms of people who are chronically lonely and like lonelier than the average person. I think it offers an immediate sense of companionship, which could be really necessary. I think it could also be a learning tool for people who may struggle with social anxiety or are rusty in terms of like small talk and getting to talk to people. I think there could be some immediate benefits in like learning how to have a quick conversation and like how to take the conversation to like a more deeper conversation, which is useful for developing friendships. I think in the long term, it's a big question mark on how long those positives are going to last. Because the thing about AI chatbots and companions, they will never get tired of you, as far as we know right now. And if you're talking to a chatbot, unlike a person, they don't have conflicting schedules with you. They can respond immediately. And they will respond in a way that is super engaging and super interested in what you're saying. They'll follow the conversation with a question mark. They'll want to hear more from you. And those are a lot of things that make us feel good in the conversation, like, oh my God, they want to know what I think. They're reading my messages. They're responding back with like well-written, thought-out responses to me, which is what they're trained to do. And that kind of continued exposure might, and it might also not matter, but it might not bode well for future human interactions with people who are humans and make mistakes and might miss your call and might not read your message promptly or respond in the way you want them to, or misread something or skim your message and say something that makes you feel upset or overlooked. But that is just part of being human and having human friendships, is giving each other grace for those kinds of mistakes. And so long term, I'm not sure what's gonna happen. I think in the immediate future, there could be some benefits to it on an individual basis.
Okay, let us thank Dr. Dominguez again for this amazing talk.
Thank you.
And now we will have a 5-minute break, so please come back in 5 minutes and we will have our next speaker.
Okay, good afternoon and welcome back, everyone. We're so happy that to continue. Hope you've enjoyed the first half, and we're going to continue on with the second half of our speaker series as everyone takes their seats. Really quickly, we also want to invite you to join us after this series over at the Graduate Hotel for our happy hour. There are non-alcoholic drinks available at this venue as well, so feel free. And Jello shots if you partake. So whatever you decide to enjoy, feel free to join us as we continue on in the conversation and keep things going. I'm going to invite our next graduate student to start off with introductions, and we'll continue with the second half of our series. Welcome back.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. So on behalf of the department's Community Engagement Committee, it is my pleasure to introduce you to our second speaker today, Dr. Natalie Pennington. Dr. Pennington is an assistant professor in the Department of Communication Studies at Colorado State University, and she received her PhD in communication at the University of Kansas in 2015 with a focus on interpersonal and computer-mediated communication. Broadly, Dr. Pennington's research centers around interpersonal channels of social connection and their support of our relationship, and utilizes both quantitative and qualitative methodologies to study their roles on outcomes like loneliness and sense of belonging. With a focus on friendships, she is also a co-leader for the American Friendship Project that we've talked about, which is an annual nationally representative survey of social connection and well-being in the US, and has also been spotlighted in several news outlets such as USA Today and The Atlantic. Her research has also been published in many eminent disciplinary and interdisciplinary journals, such as the Journal of Computer-Mediated Communication, the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships, Communication Monographs, and +1. Today, Dr. Pennington will be sharing with us her work on what these interactions can tell us about the domains of leisure and life satisfaction. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Pennington.
Thank you so much. You all are going to be so sick of friendship by the end of the day, but never for me. It's always delightful. And I was telling Jess that I was so excited that Jess was also talking about parts of the data so that I got to be like, those are the fun ones Jess talked about. And now I can share some other pieces. For those who are not familiar with the American Friendship Project, I did want to take a quick second at the start just to talk a little bit about it and the background of it and how it was built out. We're also really especially love our logo. I walked over to my bag a second ago. I do have little AFP stickers. If anyone wants a sticker of our logo, before we leave today, happy hour, see me, I'll have them. But we had this built to represent the United States, but also looks like two people hugging. and could also be thought of as a smile, which we loved. It was really fun to work on this. Me and Jeff and Mandy looked at lots of, I could also show you the really bad logos we got. But we were very happy to create this and working together. And so Amanda Holmstrom in your department, Jeff Hall, University of Kansas, and I came together. And we're really interested in the idea that, similar to what Jess was saying, our discipline does a really good job of studying and talking about family and talking about romantic relationships, but this focus on friendship seems to get lost sometimes. And especially in the context of our Surgeon General saying that we are in a loneliness epidemic, which is something that existed before the pandemic, but probably was made a little worse by, we said, well, let's look into this. Let's study this more. And so our primary goal here of saying, let's have this large-scale annual survey really focusing on social connection with specifically, right, as comm studies people, that emphasis on communication and opportunities to support well-being. We published our first big article sort of introducing people to the American Friendship Project in the first 2 years of the data. So 2022 and 2023 in the summer, we fielded our first 2 nationally representative samples of adult participants. It was between 2,200 and 2,400 each year for those 2 data sets. We also do have a longitudinal student portion that I'm not going to be talking about today that is discussed a little bit in the article. 3 of the kind of big things that we talk about in that article, besides just introducing people to what the survey is and what we were kind of learning about, is that we knew from the study, and it was actually partially goal design, that how people conceptualize what a friend is varies greatly. And so part of me even not putting the word friend in the title of my talk today was because while we are the American Friendship Project, broadly we're also understanding that how people define the term friend is very different from person to person. We even, in asking people if they have friends, if they say no, follow up with, what about people you have regular, enjoyable interactions with? So really, at the end of the day, our biggest question is just to say, if I have people that I'm socially interacting with, how does that affect my well-being and also, communication opportunities? And so in this case, really, really broad definitions of friendship, which I can dig more into and will a little in a second to show you our most recent. We also definitely found that there's a pretty strong link between different facets of well-being and levels of socialization. And so year to year looking at things, Jess mentioned a few of those. You'll see me talk specifically about loneliness and life satisfaction today, but also measured perceived stress, social support, looked at in our most recent year for 2025 when we collected data, added measures for burnout as well. So really thinking about conceptualizing social energy as a piece of the whole. And for me, maybe one of the most important findings that we came across in those first 2 years that people, I think, resonates with the average person was that while Americans are generally happy with the number of friends they have, that they are not happy with the time they spend with their friends. Kind of an important piece. And this was, again, in the article talking about the 2022-2023. Today, I'm really excited because I'm going to talk to you all about the 2025 data, which we have not shared anywhere else yet. And so I thought just to get us started, based on these 3 talking points, I'd share a couple fun, fast things about the data before I go more into our focus. So one is that, as I said, who we call a friend varies greatly. And Matt's statement was based on the first couple of years, but this is just a visualization for you all of the different labels that people applied to their friends that they reported on in 2025. And our 2025 data set was 2,006 people, again, adult Americans ranging from 18 to 95 years old. I'll go more into their demographics in a second, but you can see who we even call a friend all over the map. Very interested in the X inclusion. Like as we were at the questions for Jess, I was like, yes, we can learn about these things. It's fun. But neighbor pretty high, romantic partner pretty high. We get a jump over here and see sibling kind of also spikes up a little, but really a wide range of people we call friends. Another really fun question that I like that we ask in the data set is where we meet these people. So as we make these connections, pretty common kind of top set here. So through other friends, school, work, neighborhood, all of those pop up. We know school and work, especially in the literature, are 2 really, really common ones. One of my favorite studies that I talk about when I teach friendship is the power of a middle school teacher to influence your friends. They'll set a seating schedule in their class, and the person you sit next to is actually a higher probability to be a friend for you than if they didn't sit next to you, which I just think is delightful and interesting. So school, really powerful. And then as we get older, right, start new jobs, work also starts to influence things a little bit for us. So in 2025, these are some of the things we noticed. And then I ran this morning based on Junwin asking a question yesterday about comparing the data sets. And I was like, you know what? We actually have it looked at directly, them next to each other. So shout out for the great question when we were meeting with the grad students yesterday. So as I mentioned, the big finding that we noticed otherwise and talked a lot about was that, and this is also a pushback against headlines, by the way. So there's lots of public data that's like Americans have fewer friends than ever. And so for us, it was also a chance to say, well, like read the little teeny tiny fine text. And a lot of those studies are saying how many close friends do Americans have. And so we broaden it out. So also, it doesn't matter. The number of friends, people are pretty happy with the number of people they're connected to, whether it's I have 1 to 5 friends, or 6 to 10 friends, or some people who say they have 51 plus friends. Number, not as important as time, right? Every year, and you're seeing each time those are kind of staying pretty consistent with each other, where we're totally fine with the number, but we really wish that we had more time with people that we are connected to, which kind of brought me into the main focus for what I'll share with you all today about the 2025 data, and was one of the big shifts that we offered when we collected the study this third time, which was sociality and well-being, and the importance of sort of these parts as they come together with each other. And what we know from the literature is that social leisure is very often associated with greater well-being. So all kinds of different ways we can conceptualize this, and that's both strong ties and weak ties. So if you're familiar with the work of Julianne Holt-Lundsted at BYU, she has a great study that talks about how a lack of social connection is just as bad for our physical health as smoking cigarettes. She did not make people like smoke cigarettes or not talk to people, but did some comparative analysis with public health data to suggest that these have these similar impacts. So really drawing the line from having friends and talking to people and not only our mental health, but our physical health as well as kind of really important areas. The other one that I also think is really interesting in my acknowledgement here of both the strong ties and weak ties piece is the idea that it's really important for us to just socially interact, period. So while I talk about friendship, I also always want to make sure I'm saying there are levels to it. And so today, not saying you have to have a best friend to feel good, but you do need to be talking to people to help you feel a little bit better about things. And so some great work with that. We also have other big studies we can point to as sort of evidence of this. So one that I always also love to talk about is the Harvard Adult Development Study, right? So longitudinal research, and it's finding over and over again having these relationships and specifically friendships is valuable to our health and our daily well-being, really sustaining us over time for each other. When we focus specifically on leisure time as a subset, so when I say socially interacting with people, the assumption is that social interactions are a piece of the whole. But today, when I'm talking to you all about leisure, I'm going to look at this sort of categorically 3 ways. So I'm interested in solitary leisure time, social leisure time, and also the use of technology in different media. And so definitionally, when we think about social leisure time involving other people, right? So very obvious, hanging out together, whether that's going to a concert or hosting a game night. Solitary leisure can be a lot of, so it's what's your hobby? My husband got really into bird watching this past year. And so he did convince me to go out a couple times with him, but tends to be a solitary hobby for Joe. I like to read books. I am in a book club, so like there's a piece of it that becomes social, but otherwise I'm reading a book by myself on my iPad. And then with technology and media, kind of blurs these spaces a little bit. And so I know we've got some media psych folks in the room as well, so interested in things like watching TV, but also interested in how we connect through social media, right? Texting, which of course Jess talked about as well. So these different kind of modalities of social interaction, but also media that might be consumed more as an individual when we think about our leisure and sort of preferences for time. And I bring up and sort of end on the technology media piece here to also note some other data sets that have talked about this. And so this is from Twenge et al.'s 2019 analysis of the American Time Use Survey, where they're noting a decline in socialization for socializing with friends and partying for college students from 1987 to 2016. You can see those kind of declines that are happening, some interesting, maybe slight peaks here and there. But overall, we're noticing that there are in-person socialization things going down. And part of that study also acknowledges that at the same time, some digital things are going up. And so I also note this study was pre-pandemic. So I mentioned, yes, the pandemic maybe compounded things a little bit for people, but certainly saw some of these effects beforehand as well. I did go and look at the 2024 American Time Use survey because I was curious, and so they literally asked people about their leisure time. Two findings that they noted from the 2024 American Time Use survey that I thought were interesting and worth noting. And again, leisure could be, in this case, solitary or social activities, so all kind of squished together. But we had where men tended to, on average, engage in more leisure time than women, and that older adults significantly more so compared to my 35 to 44-year-olds in terms of spending time together. But one of the most interesting findings to me, otherwise, watching TV was one of the most time occupied on the list in terms of people reporting the types of leisure that they engaged in. And we also know that socialization in terms of time spent communicating with friends and family kept going down year over year. And so we keep seeing the solitary up, social kind of going down a little bit. Makes us a little nervous. So 2 research question areas that I'll focus on in talking to you all today. First, how does the way people spend their time relate to these questions of loneliness and life satisfaction? And second, in new questions, so one of the things we do with the AFP each year is get to add in some new questions. We ask people to identify barriers that might prevent them from socializing within their networks. And so I'll share some of the things that they themselves talked about, but also looking at some of those demographic factors that might also signal changes for individuals. To go a little deeper into the American Friendship Project for just a second in terms of the procedures and specifically the most recent survey. So we did collect this data summer 2025. We did work with a new company this year. So the first 2 years that we collected data, we worked with the Siena College Research Institute out of New York. They also do public political polling for the New York Times. We changed companies to Cloud Research, both cases working with panels across the country for people. And this is a nationally representative sample, so based census-matched region, race, ethnicity, and gender. This is not a short survey, my friends. So we even trimmed it down in this most recent year, really kind of trying to make it a little tighter. So average completion time was 21.9 minutes. I do note the mode and median here as well. So most people took about 15, which is what we were aiming for, and a median time of 17 minutes. So some range in that. The survey itself kind of consists of 4 parts. So part 1, demographics. So we gather a lot of demographic information about people, their age, their race, their ethnicity, their gender identity, their sexual orientation, their relationship status, their education level, their employment, their income, and within those, some additional questions as well. The second part of the survey, we ask about specific relationships. So these are the categories that you got to hear Jess report on data about in the 2 studies that she had done from 2022 and 2023. And this year they were asked to report on up to 5 people in their life that they would call a friend. And then on reporting on each of those individuals, providing those labels, which you all saw on the screen, how close they felt to those individuals, how they had met those people, and their use of different information communication technologies. So again, things like texting and email and phone calls and video calls and all those fun parts. Part 3 of the study is biggest part I'll be focusing on with you all today, which was sort of general reflections about their friendship, their social networks. This is where we also placed a handful of new items related to how people spend their time, as evidenced by people say they want more time. So what's the issue here, which is the fun part? So broader questions, how do you socialize? What's the composition of your network? What are barriers that exist for you? And then part 4 is where we ask the questions about well-being. And so how was your life satisfaction, your loneliness, support, companionship, and burnout in our most recent year. Some demographics for you all, and there's a ton, as I just saw that list there of all the different things that we asked people about. So I won't talk about every single one of these. I'm gonna try to highlight just a few of them in particular that I'll be coming back to as we talk through this. So sample ranged from 18 to 82 years old. 45.91 was the mean age here. It was 50.5% female, 48.6% male. We see that they primarily heterosexual. We get our balance between non-Hispanic and Hispanic Latino, 73.2% white, 42.2% married. This number down here at the bottom, it's me something I'm gonna start trying to be more like, what is your relationship status? Including friend count, I think is valuable. So 38.4% reported having 1 to 5 friends, 26.2% said 6 to 10 friends, 12.7 said 11 to 15, and then 4.6% reported having no friends. Our part 2 of the demographics here, we also asked people about whether or not they lived with other people. So 77.8% did live with somebody else. In terms of education levels, we kind of span some different levels in terms of bachelor's, high school, some college, associate. In terms of income, all over the place on income. So we kind of have bimodal, which had happened each year where we had highest percentages at a higher end and that lower end, and then most people otherwise kind of falling in the middle of that. I want to talk about the fun stuff with you all, the results to these questions, and to help you kind of understand the answer to the how does time affect, I thought it valuable for you to know some of the items we added to the survey specifically that inform these conversations. So one of the things we did was we asked about different ways people might spend their average weekday time on. So on a typical weekday, how much time do you spend watching TV, playing video games, scrolling through social media, browsing the internet, and socializing in person? And you can see, similar to what the American Time Youth Survey found, people are spending their most time watching TV of any of these categories, but not too terribly far off in those other four. Video games kind of our smallest. So one of the ways that we're measuring and thinking about how this might influence or relate to loneliness and life satisfaction. The second one that we asked about was whether or not they had interacted with somebody the day before or not as a yes, no. And then we also specifically looked at whether or not those interactions were mediated or whether those interactions were in person. So what I'm showing you all on the screen specifically are people who said, no, I didn't talk to anyone yesterday, and we followed up with, okay, but did you talk to them in a digital capacity? We asked the same thing of people who said yes to this, but just wanted to kind of clarify and check here. So the confirmation that roughly 10% of the sample said, no, I did not talk to any family or friends yesterday. A high percentage who said they had texted, phone calls kind of in the middle zone, and then video calls the smallest category of all. And so knowing those sort of areas, the different actions that I might engage in on a typical day, but also the actual reference point of modalities on the day before. First, in looking at loneliness and analyzing this, we see some positive relationships and some negative relationships. And this is controlling for some of those demographic features. We'll come back to the demographics in just a second here. But for positive relationships, on the average weekday, the amount of time scrolling social media and browsing or reading content on the internet were both positively related to loneliness. Scrolling social media was the highest, and specifically using the term scrolling for us to acknowledge the active versus passive uses of technology in this case. And then for negative relationships, so opportunities for us to potentially combat loneliness, on the average weekday, the amount of time socializing in person and playing video games were both negatively related to loneliness, which I thought was kind of interesting. And then in terms of our last category, I feel like I missed one here. Let me go back. No, that's a typo on the screen. That shouldn't say playing video games, that should say watching TV. There we go. So watching TV was the big reveal here. Watching TV negatively related to loneliness. Video games was no relationship, so I apologize for that one. In addition to looking at the types of technology, we also said, again, that yes-no question. So those who reported no communication with family or friends the prior day or had only texted, greater loneliness, and then no relationship for phone calls or video calls, which we have inconsistencies with, as we know from previous years. Turning to life satisfaction specifically, for positive relationships, on an average weekday, the amount of time socializing in person, positively related. Everything else was a no relationship. So while loneliness, we saw some differences start to pop up there. In this case, it was only the in-person socialization that influenced my life satisfaction. And then specifically in terms of the immediate communication the day prior, no communication and texting, both lower life satisfaction, and no relationships for phone or video for life satisfaction either. I'll come back to these pieces. The second question was interested in barriers that come up and sort of understanding some of those differences. So one of the things that I looked at specifically was whether some of the demographic questions that we asked impacted that effort towards socialization or opportunities for socialization. And also that earlier question that I mentioned to you all, where we asked people how satisfied they were with the amount of time they were spending with the people in their lives. And age is complicated. If you just treat it as a basic continuous variable and say across time, then we see that younger participants report more time socializing than older participants, and on an average weekday, report greater satisfaction. But if we start to kind of dig into a little and break into groups, we actually see that younger people are also the loneliest. So they're spending way more time with people and are generally happier with their time than older adults, but they are feeling quite a bit lonelier, which we can come back to. Income was one that we also wanted to take a look at. So those with higher income reported greater in-person socialization on an average weekday, but it was unrelated to their satisfaction with the time they were spending with their friends, which is interesting. Health issues. So in this case, we added a question in 2025 that we had not previously asked, that asked if they had had either a chronic or emergent health issue in the past year that had affected them in some way. Experiencing them had no impact on the amount of time you spent socializing in person on an average weekday, but it was negatively related to your satisfaction with the time that you were spending with people. And gender, same thing, unrelated to the in-person socialization time spent, but was negatively related to my satisfaction with the time I was spending with people. So thinking about how maybe some barriers that might be popping up for individuals experiencing health issues, and as we saw earlier with the American Time Use data, differences that emerge in terms of women's amount of time socializing and other things that might happen as well if you have additional identity characteristics to keep in mind, like if you're a mom and time you have come into play. The last one I wanted to share with you all was, for me, a fun question for us to add. So we had always asked the time question, right? We had always said, how satisfied are you with the time you're spending with your friends? And this year we added a follow-up where if somebody had said that they were unhappy to varying degrees, which ended up being said almost half the sample, they got a follow-up that said, here's possible barriers. Right? So if these are things that might be making it that's hard for you, what are they? What are the reasons? And I share these ones with you all because I think they mirror some of what we saw with some of that demographic data. So in this case, the most common answer that individuals gave for why they felt like they did not feel happy about the time they were spending with friends or their amount of time they could spend with friends is they said, money is a barrier. I don't have enough money to hang out with my friends as much as I would like to. Health was the next highest one in this category. And specifically with health, we can think about both physical health and mental health and how those pieces kind of relate to this. The next, people said, I'm just too tired. I'm like a lot of other things I'm doing. It's just a little hard for me. It's about 31% of those in the sample. Very close to that was feeling like there wasn't enough time, which is its own message, just like, no, I have things that are competing with this to some extent. And the last one I thought was also really valuable for us to consider, not a category that I had mentioned quite yet, but is a question of access to friends. And we actually had write-in answers related to this as well, where people said, I don't have a driver's license. I don't have a car. And so it's even if they do live geographically close to me, but if I live in a more suburban or sprawled community, I can't get to them. I can't hang out with them. And so maybe even harder for those individuals to be like, they're right there and I can't get to them, versus if you're in a large city with good public transportation, that might make that pretty easy and simple for you. So in thinking about this, and this is, again, very new stuff. We're only just now starting to get into the 2025 data, which I really like. But some initial takeaways that I can think about with this particular part of the study is that we don't have to spend, of course, always when we move things over, I knew it was going to happen to me. You don't have to spend time, you don't have to spend money to hang out with your friends. Like, that's the one that kills me. When I saw that that was our highest category by far, and we also know that income was a barrier, is we could just invite people to our house, which people don't do as much as they used to either, by the way. We did ask how often people invite people over to their house or go to their friend's house, and those numbers are shown to be declining than in the past. But if we were to make that effort, and I do think maybe pandemic related, that it could help us. I know you need to go outside. You could take a walk together if you don't want to invite them over. Letting people support you, I think, is a really, really valuable message. So we've always included social support as a part of the American Friendship Project. It's such a core part of the work that Dr. Holmstrom does, but also we know is very valuable to all of our relationships. And when we think about that finding about the health-related, where it was, I am socializing with people at a pretty decent rate, but I'm not happy with it, I myself think about as someone who has a chronic health issue, sometimes if I'm with my friends, I'm trying not to think about that thing, right? And so now I'm not enjoying the time with my friends because I'm trying to mask and have fun with my friends. Or if it's same thing with mental health, right? If you're just feeling unhappy, but you're like, oh, I'll act happy while I'm with them, it doesn't actually help you enjoy the time that you're spending with those people. But if you were to tell them, you know what? Today wasn't fun. I'm not feeling good about things, right? Letting them be there to assist you, I think, is really meaningful. One of my favorite questions we asked in the first year of the American Friendship Project data is that we asked people to tell us what's the single most important thing that someone did to support you in the past year. And reading through those answers, where people were like, I was sick and they drove me to a doctor's appointment. I wasn't feeling well and they made me soup. And so little ways we can be leaning on our friends to help us, but we got to tell them. And so that's that sort of tension, I think, that comes up in those. In terms of some of the other findings that we saw, one that I think is really valuable is thinking twice about texting. Right? You've now heard me and Jess kind of both mention this, but being mindful in particular of the asynchronous nature of that. right? So really great study that Jeff Hall did with Nancy Bain, 2012, calling and texting too much, about mobile media expectations that can form in relationships, and specifically friendships. I think if we create the expectation that our friend is supposed to respond right away through texting, but they don't, what that can kind of do for our satisfaction and make us feel disconnected from people. Like, oh, it's easy to send a text. But if you're not getting those responses and it doesn't feel like active communication, it's not very good for us. And so that's where thinking about, if you are feeling lonely, talk to a person. Don't just send a message and hope you can talk to a person. Always got to be on both ends of things. So I do think it's valuable to note that solitary time can be okay too. So I'm not saying that people should always be socializing, because we even know, right, in some of these cases, while people were socializing more, that it didn't necessarily mean they felt less lonely all the time. But finding opportunities to boost your baseline and being aware of kind of where you're at and what you're feeling, I think is one of the most important things, right? If I'm feeling lonely, perhaps I should talk to a person. Don't just engage in a different type of behavior, and keep kind of open connections for that. In terms of future directions, I could have made like a million slides. And even hearing you all talk, right, Mandy came over to me in between with Jess's, and we're like, oh my gosh, we should ask that too. And I got to sneak one on here, which was actually something that Brooke brought up in her class when we were chatting with them yesterday. But one that I'm really excited about that we currently have one grant application in for, and we're working on another, specifically thinking about rural and urban communities. So a question that we added in 2025 was for people to actually give us their zip code, so we can code for the rurality of communities to kind of understand that as an additional demographic feature. We have not done it yet, but it is on the list, and specifically interested in how that might impact our socialization efforts. Interested in online community spaces. If you don't have access to individuals in your immediate community, especially if perhaps you're from a more rural community and you don't have those different identity factors around you, are there online spaces that might be able to be useful for you? We know from past research that there's definitely chances for that to be helpful, all within reason. Age is one that we keep circling back to, so with these same grant applications, really interested in, and Jeff actually did also lead a study from the 2022 and 2023 data, also published in PLOS ONE, focused on sort of the ambivalence that exists for 18 to 29-year-olds, and that it's this time of really, really high connection, but also really high disconnection. And so we have a lot of people, sounding the alarm about older adults. We actually think that there's really important conversation to be had about young adults too, and their socialization, and kind of boosting that baseline for them. Health issues, Jess and I are very excited to dive into this piece of the 2025 data more and think about those experiences, especially people who experience chronic health issues. Anecdotally, from other studies I've done, Jeff and I did one where we asked people to actually reflect specifically on a period of their life that had low sociality, and the number of people in those answers who said, I just was, I had a health thing and I didn't want to talk to people. I didn't want to bother people about it. And so for me, just really important to kind of keep driving on. And then I mentioned the great idea that Brooke had mentioned in class, and was like, oh my gosh, of course, is employment types specifically. So we have done some research looking at change in employment and how that's affected people. So we've asked people about life changes that they've had in the past year. And in this case, Brooke had mentioned, what about people who work third shift? Right? So somebody who works overnight and their free leisure time is while other people are at work, how do we get those social needs met in different ways, perhaps putting even greater reliance on the importance of sociality with your colleagues, which is another subset we've glanced at within the data. But I am really excited for questions you all have, because there's good chance that there's at least a piece of the AFP data that might answer these things, because it's not a short survey. But thank you all so much.
Thank you so much for the wonderful talk. And like Dr. Pennington said, I'm sure there's a lot of questions, and we have quite a bit of time as well. So if you do have a question, please just raise your hand and I will come over to you.
Alex, right? Correct. Yes. There was two Alexes. But you're the Alex that's a fan of Arizona. I'm a basketball person, and I was like, you beat the Jayhawks, so I was sad.
Yeah, it was a good time. I'm very invested. I really like what's going on here. It's really interesting stuff. It doesn't really matter about my background, but I worked retail for about 3.5 years.
Oh, fun.
And so jumping off the employment type and thinking about my own experiences, is there any measure of how many hours are worked as like sort of an opportunity cost sort of thing? Like if you're working X number of hours and you don't have yes, the opportunity to interact with people, but also the like social capacity to interact with them.
Yeah. So I think there's multiple pieces that we can pull from that. One is we have had every single year the do you work full-time or part-time question, and have included that in at least one study so far, and it didn't seem to have an impact on things, which was a little surprising. But in addition to the like, do you work third shift, I do anecdotally also think that there's something really interesting in the sociality that exists within your workplace as a space for connection, and that could be both colleagues and customers, right? I was an Apple buddy at Applebee's. I started in high school all through undergrad, like very social in a restaurant setting versus as a professor, any given day, the people I interact with most are my students. And then if my colleagues are in their office, I might chat with them, but different.
Yeah, I didn't work at Applebee's, but I worked at Apple, so it's similar,
Nice.
right?
There we go.
The other thing about that is that if you don't have like a standard 9 to 5 Monday through Friday thing, and your active shifts might be on the weekends when you can't interact, again, an access sort of thing.
Yes. So exactly, different types of shifts. When are you here? Where are you not? I also think people who have jobs that require them to travel a whole lot as well, and sort of how that might change what your expected baselines are. And so, yeah, all pieces that I'm like, ooh, okay, another year for us to keep building on this.
And another, like, just me personal thing.
Please.
Just personally exploring the video game part where it's not supported or there's no relationship, differentiating between like more social play versus single player.
Yes, and we do have additional questions that actually allow us to go even deeper into that. So these were just single items on this. My current advisee at CSU, Adam, actually is doing his dissertation entirely about all of the variations of online gaming and how things like text and video and audio can all be folded into, and the type of game and task-based versus more like leisure fun checking in with each other. Yeah, I hate making it a single thing, and yeah, you're not wrong. Yes, lots of choices here and there.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. I think she was trying to get the mic down the road.
Hi, thank you so much for
you.
a very wonderful presentation. My question is mostly about your survey. How did you frame health-related questions? Like, was it from this perspective, like, okay, what is your health condition and your interaction, like how much you are interacting with people? Or was it, okay, how much interaction impacted your health? So how did you frame the questions?
So 2 health-related questions that were added this year. The first was just a very basic in the demographic section. Yes, no, did you experience some sort of a health issue in the past year? It had a parenthetical, this might be a chronic health issue, emergent health issue, and letting people self-define what they determined whether that was a yes or no. As a follow-up question, if they said yes, we did also clarify whether it was a chronic issue. And then for the sake of analysis and the regression, including that as a dummy-coded yes-no variable to see the impact on socialization and satisfaction.
One more question. So about the definition of friendship. So you said people define friendship in different ways. So did you allow people to write their definitions? Like what was the, I'm really curious about your instrument actually.
Yeah. So I'm going to nerd out about this piece for just a second with you all. And I think at least the grad students got to hear me talk about it yesterday. And Mandy's heard me say this one like a million times. So in 2022, the very first question of the survey said, what are 3 things that would make you call somebody a friend? And the most common answers we saw in that data, which we had graduate students code, were trustworthy and loyal and honest and always there for me. And then the next question said, could you give me the names or initials of up to 5, it was 7 people in the first year, up to 7 people you call a friend. And we didn't see as many friends as we thought we would. And then in year 2, we did not have that question as the very first question of the survey. The very first question of the survey was, how many friends do you have? No definition provided, and it could range from, again, 0 in this case, up to 51 plus friends. And then after that, we said, okay, cool, give us the names and initials of up to 5 people you would call friends. And even though in year 2 we only had 5 people they could name for us, and in the first year they had 7, we got significantly more data year 2, because in that first year people were primed to think about really a best friend, a close friend, right? If I hold the threshold for every single person in my life that I call a friend to trustworthy and honest and loyal and there for me, I'm suddenly creating a very high baseline. And so in 2025, similarly, did not include that as the first question, went with the numerical count and got more data as a result. And got us more labels of data, right? So as you think about the people who are like, this is my friend, but they're my neighbor. This is my friend, but they're an old colleague. And so seeing some of that range. And that other category was fascinating, like it's my hairdresser, it's my aerobics instructor. And so some cool interestings there.
Yeah, it seems like it's kind of in between a close friend and acquaintance.
Yeah, I mean, it really runs the whole, because people include family members, people include romantic partners. Brooke and I did a really fun one about people who call their romantic partners their best friend, and whether that's a good thing or not.
Kind of overlap.
All over the place.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We had the hand down here that I didn't want to miss, but then more.
That's all right.
Oh, cool. Yeah, we don't have to move that down, and then that way we can come over. Hello.
So I'm curious if, as part of the data you collected, if people that have pets have a different type of feeling of loneliness, or like, maybe I don't have friends, but I have a pet, so I feel happy.
Yes. So even though our question said people you would call a friend, there were people every year who wrote in a pet. Not a ton of people, but people who wrote in, and we had the what is their relationship to you other question, and that's where we would then learn that the name that they gave us was their pet. Consider it as very meaningful. Anecdotally, what I will say is these new time-related questions that we added in 2025, Jeff and I actually collected a smaller sample through Prolific in fall 24 to test those items ahead of time and see answers to those questions, including helping us generate the checklist for barriers. And so one of the barriers that came up in the written text from that was people who said, I can't spend time with my friends and family because I have to take care of my cat, because I have to take care of my dog. And also related that back to financial pieces where I don't have the money to spend to have somebody watch them for me to go do this thing. And so it's this interesting, pets serve a very important role in our life. I'm ready to show people the cute pictures of my pets. Love them. I got dogs and a cat. I've been meeting all of the pets in the department. But it's they're there for us, but to what extent does that individual socialization serve a role above and beyond personal relationships and human? Not enough data at all for us to test it because it's such a small percentage, but I would love to do that study if someone wants to do that study with me. I think there was at least 2 other hands, and then maybe John. I saw 3 go up in a row.
Yeah, I think I'll go first, and I will pass the mic to
Yeah, we'll just keep weaving it. Hello.
My question is for your American Friendship Project. Do you include any question about what kind of topic do people chat with a friend via different technology? Because I was thinking that maybe the exact topic people chat with friend may be different when we texting, when we have a video chat, or when we speak on the phone. So does that relate to any of the benefit that we could gain from chatting with our friend?
Yeah. Would be nearly impossible to capture in the nature of the AFP survey itself. As again, this is a cross-sectional reflection on interactions across the past year. What I will point to is a really fantastic study that has done a little bit of that work. In my mind, it's Fernandez et al. 2025, but it's a Journal of Computer-Mediated Communication article where they do actually cross modalities and then communication episodes and looking at those interactions. And so Jeff and Mandy and I have actually done a little bit of work before about the types of communication we can have with people also involved. They were 2 former MSU people, I think, too, right? Evan and Evan and Daniel. There we go. Yes. Okay. Yeah, okay. So, but we did multiple checks on different types of communication interactions we could have, joking around, meaningful talk, how that boosted our daily well-being, and the type of communication didn't matter. It was just interacting with someone. So on an anecdotal one-day basis, doesn't seem to have a big effect. Fernandez did start to see some nuances. I think that what the goal of the AFP is to do is to say, big picture, what's this looking like? And then as we notice something like, what is it about texting? Is it that it's maybe more meta communication, coordinating, micro stuff versus these, Jess gave the great example where an email might be this longer letter, meaningful thing. Is that where we're seeing this problem with texting? And if texting was used in a particular way, or like we were saying, if video games were used in a particular way, it might be different, probably. And like, I hope that that makes people excited to do those studies.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Natalie. It's been a pleasure to listening to your presentation, and especially since last time we've seen each other at NCA last year. Yeah, it's been a long time, but it's great to see you again. So my question is from. It's kind of an intuition and feeling. So from my perspective, so I'm very curious about the processes of how the friendship or how the friendships are built up and how they end, or how break up or something. And of course we know that the best way to capture this dynamics is to use the longitudinal data or something. But I really want to know. So, in the questionnaire or survey of the American Friendship Project, can we capture some of the opinions from the respondents about how they feel about how they feel in terms of the processes they build up a new friendship, or how they feel like how if they get the feeling that a friendship is going to end, or other friendship has ended. I really want to, because sometimes we do have the experiences of struggling to make new friend in a new environment, or sometimes because of some unavoidable reasons we have to be separated from some close friends or something, and that's something I really personally want to know. Thank you for your sharing.
Thank you for setting me up for a whole other chunk of the AFP data that I haven't even talked about yet. So as I mentioned, in that first year that we asked them about up to the names initials of up to 7 friends, and then when we cut it to 5 in 2023, it was because the last 2 friendships that we asked about were, did you make a new friend in the last year, and did you have a friendship end or become less close in the last year? And we got specific data related to those. And then 2025, we still included for people who said they did not have friends, because each year we did get a percentage of the population who said no friends at all. In 2025, we did ask people who said they have no friends if they'd had a friendship end. In both cases, we get additional measures that we can learn about. So in the, for instance, end friendship, which I think is especially interesting, Jess and I are actually currently working on research to submit for NCA related to that, looking at the concept of relational entropy. So Andrew Ledbetter had developed a newer scale to look at entropy as both a question of decay, sort of just casual, like I just don't have enough time. It's not that I don't like you, but it's harder for me to stay connected, and we're sort of fading away from each other, versus destruction, the like, you are dead to me, we are ending this friendship, something happened. And so looking at sort of those facets and why people's friendships end, because that is one of the questions we ask, like, oh, okay, you said you're not as close, whose fault is it? What happened? Tell us more. And so excited to kind of learn about those pieces, and it's something that we'll be looking at from AFP data. And then separately, I had done a study with college students asking about friendships that become less close, what could happen. So we'll be looking at those as a study 1, study 2 design for the quantitative data. For new friendships, in addition to being, did you make a new friend? If they had not previously reported on that person in the 5 names, they did share all of the same things. So how close, where'd you meet, those kinds of things. But what's also interesting is that when we ask people to generally assess friendships, so in that part 3 of the survey, we also asked them if they felt it was particularly easy or hard at this time in their life to make new friends, because I say we know, researchers tend to know and see that after a certain time point, it gets harder, that our friendship networks tend to shrink after we are 25, and it gets harder to make new friends. I am especially interested in this sort of the 35 to 44-year-old reference point. I showed earlier how they have, of all the age groups, the lowest amount of leisure time, and I think that's sort of related to this. It's harder to make new friends if you're not doing things for fun and having social hobbies, if everything is related to, I'm taking care of my pets, I'm taking care of my kids, I'm going to work, I'm going to school. I'm, having to commute from further distances because living in a place is harder to spend the money on. All of those kind of spill over and affect our other relationships. And so it's not one that we have focused on specifically in the data yet. We have all the data to look at new. End is coming. We're excited. There's some cool stuff. Yeah. Thank you.
Hi, thanks
Hello.
for this talk. It's been
Thank
really
you.
interesting. My question's a little bit of a departure from other questions in that I'd like to hear a little bit about your experience with like the logistics of the survey and sort of the how you got it funded, how you communicate the findings, how you that kind of side of it, if you don't mind.
It's a beast. It is not for the faint of heart to do a survey this big, and I love having Mandy and Jeff as co-parts in this, and really making clear choices about how to, we haven't even talked about we have the longitudinal student piece of this too, and Mandy and Brooke led the year 2 going back to the college students who said they were willing to come back and following them up and paying them, and so shout out Michigan State who funded the longitudinal. And our very first year of the survey, each of us went to our respective institutions and said, we have this idea, we want to fund it, will you help us? And they split it 3 ways. And then in the year 2, I was at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, so applied for a college level grant that covered that data collection and also the creation of our logo and branding. And at that point, it was really important for us to have that piece of it because we thought one of the values of the study is not just the articles we get out of it, which also are kind of messy and hard, right? June was saying earlier, like, we ask a lot of questions, but they're not always super deep questions. So it's not just about the writing the journal article, but the public distribution. So like it really does bug me that I see these public headlines about people not having as many friends and how we define and think about these and how they relate to well-being. I could go like really annoyed about survey design questions. And so for me, it was the chance for us to ask these things in a way that I think is more representative of the actual lived experience of someone and then getting that out there. And so building those relationships through public scholarship, through talking to reporters and saying, hey, here's things that I think are useful for people to know. So like that piece of it, really, really valuable to us. And sort of the structural design, that is, the +1 article goes really deep into the entire parts of it, but like for well-being, for instance, going with those established measures, but a couple new ones too. So most people, if you've studied well-being, the UCLA loneliness scale, really well validated, right? Jess had that up on the screen. Life satisfaction was the diner et al. 1985, 5 items, we know it. But the connection-disconnection was a newer scale. Loke and Dunn had just recently come out with that, and even making the argument about connection and disconnection as two opposite ends of things versus the like together was fun, adding burnout in the most recent year. So we try to balance established, clear scales and items with, but this is a place for us to test and learn things too, especially with the size of the sample and the variability to see if these things make sense. And so some of it is collaborative, how much can we fit? And then also acknowledging that there are ways for us to shift year to year what our focus might be. So like every year we change the open text questions, which is really, really fun to me to kind of hear about the new things we learn from people through those responses. I hope that answered it.
I also just kind of wondered, do you have a mechanism for public engagement around like how do you, other than just like your connections with reporters, how do you get the findings out in the public sphere? Did you create a structure for that, or do you have a structure for that?
I kind of learned through Jeff. So Jeff Hall was my advisor at the University of Kansas, building a really good relationship with the communication folk at my university. So we would do press releases, both when I was at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and now at Colorado State. And I'll say Colorado State's been really great about multiple modalities to release those press releases. So they've done both traditional, let's blast out to people about the article in text, but do podcast recordings as well to have audio clips. But I think me, Jeff, and Mandy have all tried to be just available to talk to people and share about it where we can. We're in, I think, perpetually in the process of making sure that we're able to launch the website and haven't quite gotten there yet. And part of that is just competing time with other things, but what we can do.
Did you have a?
Hi.
If people are listening now and interested in parts of the survey that you haven't gotten to, how might students or people here collaborate or connect with you?
Right, because you did hear Brooke and Jess have both worked on this. Junwin's worked on this. We have Maura Corder at the University of Kansas. I mentioned my student, Adam Kwan. Adam Bazetta has also the 2022 and 2023, not the entire part of it. So some of the open text questions aren't included, but like All of the numerical data is available through Open Science Framework. They're linked from the +1 article for people to look at. And then the 2025, once we start doing some publication from that, we'll post it online as well. But we built into the IRB applications for this to always be publicly accessible for other people. Thanks, Brooke. Yeah. And also, if you're like, really want to know about a piece, I'm going to be like, yeah, let's talk. So reach out to me. Thank you.
Let's give another round of applause for both of our speakers. We hope you can join us at the Graduate for our happy hour where we can continue conversations, hopefully make a new friend, and see if we can add someone else into our pocket. Really quickly, you see I did that? You see I did that? You like that? Thank you. I have two gifts that I want to present, make sure that our guests feel thanked. So on behalf of the Department of Communication, on behalf of the committee, we want to say thank you to both of our guests. I'll invite them to come forward, and we have a gift for you, a special gift.
You're so sweet. Thank you. You all have been so amazing. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much.
And this is just a little something for you to take back and remember this moment, this visit, and us by, and to hopefully come back sometime and spend again with us. Thank you all for coming. This concludes this series, and we hope to see you afterwards.
Thank you so much.